The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome to The Divine Truth on Revolution Radio. Due to a slight mix-up with times, our show is starting an hour late today, as I wasn't aware that the times had changed in the US. But we should have my co-host Nyssa and our guest this week, Benjamin Fulford, here. You guys there?
Yeah, we're here.
I'm here.
Hi, Benjamin. How are you?
Good. 8 morning here.
Good morning.
It's about 8 o'clock in the morning for Benjamin, so I hope you're awake.
I'm awake.
Hi, Benjamin. You there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you get any closer to your mic? It's not that loud, but I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just get closer to the mic.
It's nice to have you on this week. I wanted to start off by talking about yesterday, Saturday, the 11th of March, was the anniversary of the Fukishima disaster, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Were you in Japan when it happened, when the tsunami hit?
I was in Japan, and I also tried to warn the Japanese government that they were about to be hit with a nuclear terror attack before Fukushima happened.
Right, there hasn't been much in the news since it happened, really. I mean, there's almost been sort of media blackout. Living in Japan, what is your sort of side of the story as to what's actually happening in Japan now as far as Fukushima is concerned? Is there a media blackout, or I mean, what are they talking about it? What's the latest on Fukushima there?
People can go there and see for themselves. I have a Geiger counter, my own Geiger counter, and I've gone there, and there's no radiation. It's all a giant fear porn psychological operation at this point. But what did happen, and you know, I've put out evidence for this, detailed evidence, but a nuclear weapon that was stolen from the Russian submarine Kursk was divided into, it was a 500 megaton weapon. It was divided into 5 smaller weapons and drilled into the seabed off the shore of Fukushima. And it was not a natural disaster. It was a terrorist incident aimed at extorting Japan's foreign exchange reserves.
Okay, who was behind that? Who was behind that?
In concrete terms, it's like Peter Hans Kolvenbach, the former head of the Jesuits, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. He called the Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan the day after and demanded Japan hand over all its holdings of U.S. treasuries, or else the next day would hit Tokyo itself. I have evidence. So it was an extortion by the families that own the Federal Reserve Board. That's how I look at it. I also heard from a member of the Rothschild family that their plan was to evacuate 40 million people from the Kanto Plain and move them to North Korea. And Prime Minister Naoto Kan Naoto, who was Prime Minister at the time, said at a conference at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan that yes, they tried to get him to move everybody out of Tokyo. The whole operation failed, fortunately, and Tokyo is just fine, and there is no radiation. That's the reality of it. I live 200 kilometers from Fukushima. And whenever rain came from that direction, I'd go to places where water gathered, where you'd be likely to find radioactivity. I never found anything except normal background radiation. The only place we detected radiation was along the seashore of Fukushima, which fits with what would have happened if it had been a seabed nuclear weapon.
Right. Okay. So I know there's been a lot of fallout from Fukushima into the Pacific. Obviously, there's been a lot since it happened 6 years ago. Is there any attempts for a cleanup to clean that up at all, or?
you have to understand that the ocean is incredibly huge, and there's been an enormous dilution, but the fact is that even the seafood coming from that area now is okay. They test it, and there's and there's nothing. It's just you got to remember, for example, Nagasaki and Hiroshima were the epicenter where they dropped the nuclear bombs. Now a vibrant modern city center, full of people. And so an atomic bomb creates a momentary flash of radioactivity, but then it all dissipates.
Right. Because there's been a lot of reports from like the west coast of the United States with fish being washed up on shore, and all kinds of reports that you're not supposed you shouldn't eat the fish.
There's been an incredible psychological warfare operation concerning Fukushima, and there's been an incredible amount of disinformation pumped out. But what I recommend for people to do is check for themselves. Get yourself a Geiger counter. Go to the Pacific Ocean and see. I mean, go to the stores. They're still selling the salmon. They're still selling all the seafood, and nobody's dying. And not a single person has died of radioactivity poisoning in Japan since Fukushima. Not one.
Right, okay.
And you remember, the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan is full of reporters who actually in Japan who actually go to Fukushima, and they're not reporting stuff like this because they're not finding it in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Only on these fake internet sites put out by agencies, that have this Fukushima fear porn.
Do you know? You said that nuclear weapon was broken up into 5 devices. Do you know where the other devices were used?
Well, no, it was. Let me tell you the whole story, because I talked, and let me tell you just my sources. It includes British MI6 intelligence, KGB, Japanese military intelligence, special air service, all sorts of sources. Okay. The whole picture was in the year 2000, the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk sank, and 4 500 megaton nuclear weapons were stolen from it. Okay? One of them was sent to a Nazi submarine base in Sao Tome in the southern Pacific. What you need to understand is when World War II ended, some Nazis kept their submarine bases. They did not surrender, and they used them to smuggle drugs and finance their operations so they could continue their battle,
Yeah.
Anyway, it was taken to the Sao Tome base. From there, it was taken to a base in New Guinea, where there's another submarine base. And I've previously put the GPS coordinates for this submarine base, and you can see it on Google Earth.
Right.
From there, it was taken to the Philippine Yacht Club, where a man by the name of Stevens. This, by the way, is the same Ambassador Stevens, so-called Ambassador Stevens, who was later killed in Libya, who presided over the operation to smuggle the nuclear weapon into Japan. And one of the people actually involved in the smuggling, he uses the code name Alexander Romanov. I've met him many times. He was called to Thailand, Pattaya, Thailand, where he was taken with a blindfold and taken to a room where he was shown 70 kilograms of marijuana and a nuclear weapon, and said he was going to smuggle both of them into Japan. And it was smuggled in, I say, via the Philippine Yacht Club to an island off the shore of Japan, where it was taken on a fishing boat, and it was transported by car from there to property owned by former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone. And from there, it was taken to the North Korean headquarters in downtown Tokyo. And from there, it was taken to the deep-sea drilling ship, the Chikyu. And while this was happening, I was phoning the Japanese government, because they were telling me this, that there's a nuclear weapon. It's on that boat, and nobody did anything about it. And then it was drilled. It was this 500 kilogram weapon was drilled. It was cut into 5 different, divided into 5 different smaller weapons, and drilled 10 kilometers into the seabed.
Right.
Create a sequence. They needed to divide it into 5 to create a kind of like a, like when you rock a car to get it out of the mud effect. It's sort of a ripple effect,
Right. Okay.
And there was a preach, Father Izumi, who a Japanese Christian priest, had a member of the Japanese self-defense force come to him and say, "I need your shelter." And he was one of the technicians who was involved in this operation. He thought they were testing for, doing research on earthquakes, and he didn't realize what they were doing until after it happened.
Right.
And then all his colleagues were killed. So he sought shelter with the father, Paolo Izumi, and the witness is still under the witness protection program. He's being sheltered by a Christian group in the United States. But we have all the evidence needed to convict the people behind this attack. And I think it's going to happen. I think you're going to see the people involved in this mass murder incident actually face legal charges, and probably not too far in the future. And that includes Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel.
Right. Okay. You've been I've been reading your blogs for quite a while, and recently you've been saying there's been a lot of arrests of the cabal. Literally like thousands of people have been arrested, but there doesn't seem to be any visible change in like any kind of political system or any kind of banking system. If people are being arrested, why is nothing? There's no sort of change happening. Why is that?
Well, I mean, it's a slow process to change the entire planet, but you can see that since Donald Trump took office, that over 1,500 pedophiles have been arrested. This is not reported in the corporate media, but the local media, for example, the Los Angeles newspapers and TV stations reported that 474 pedophiles were arrested in California, and a similar number in Canada. But the big corporate news monopolies are not reporting this, but it is happening. And you see things like an aide to John McCain being arrested for child molesting, and that's to get at McCain himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that, in fact, this week some big politicians have been arrested in the U.S., but I'm yet to confirm this. However, another thing I can confirm from my own sources is that King Salman of Saudi Arabia and 25 princes and 1,500 members of their family have fled Saudi Arabia. Now, in the official news, what you'll see is that they're on a trip to Indonesia. And now the latest news is that they've decided to prolong their visit by 3 days. But what I'm hearing from my sources, which is the CIA in Indonesia, is that they're offering $100 billion to the Indonesian government in exchange for being allowed asylum there.
Right. Okay. Why are they hiding out in Indonesia? What's the reason behind that?
Because Trump said he was going to destroy ISIS, and these are the people who are financing ISIS.
Right. Okay.
And so suddenly their goose is cooked, because they're not being sheltered anymore at the high level of the U.S. government.
So have the Indonesians agreed to this deal?
It's still up in the air. And the other thing that's going on behind the scenes is apparently all the world's Freemasons, top Freemason grandmasters, are gathering in Japan starting this week to elect a new Grand Master. And apparently that's going to lead to all sorts of changes in the visible world, because these are people who, are highly influential behind the scenes. So something's going to happen. Apparently the election is on March 25th.
Right, okay.
So,
that sort of leads me on to what do you know about the meetings that they have, such as the Bilderberg meetings? Do you know what is discussed at those meetings?
Well, yeah, the Chinese I think they want to talk about the Bohemian Grove.
All right, yeah, we can talk about that.
This is Alex Jones got that great scoop where they showed they have a big statue of Moloch, a ancient Middle Eastern god that they worshipped, and the Chinese wiretapped that meeting and found out that they had a plot to kill 90% of humanity, and that's what started this huge battle to overthrow these people, and this is really bizarre stuff. I actually went to Italy and met these people, and you can confirm it now in multiple ways. But at the very top level of the Western power structure were a group of people who worshiped the black sun and who practiced human sacrifice. Apparently, they believed that if they carried out these sacrifices, they'd be given enormous power and wealth. And
Mm.
you know, a couple weeks ago, they had a meeting calling for a world government in Dubai, a meeting in Dubai calling for a world government. And they had an Ark of Baal, which is also Molech, which is this god that they sacrifice to. We know it as Satan. In front of the meeting place, and they also reproduced this arch in downtown London and downtown New York. This group was hoping to have their cult take over the entire planet, and that was what they were planning.
Right.
And you know, the Holocaust is a burnt offering made to this god, okay?
Mm.
And that was what happened during World War II, and then 9/11 was another Holocaust offering to their, deity. And they're very, very dangerous people, and they're being hunted down now. They're losing power. That's why you had Brexit. That's why you had Donald Trump get elected, and that's why you're going to see more leaders fall in Europe over the coming months. Merkel is out, I hear, in Germany, and there'll be a new president in France, probably Marine Le Pen, in April, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, and here in Japan, Prime Minister Abe is being, exposed as having accepted massive bribes, and he's on his way out.
Right.
And they got rid of the president of Korea, South Korea. So, you're asking, things are happening. You can see it now. It's undeniable. I mean, and information's coming out.
Yes, there's a lot of, in Europe especially, where referendums to leave the EU. I know Italy is has decided to leave. Britain's already decided to leave. Other countries are now deciding to have referendums to leave the European Union. What do you think about that? Will that make any change happen by leaving the EU?
Absolutely, because you got to remember, the EU is structured the exact same way as the Soviet Union was. Its leadership was not elected. It was not even meritocratically selected. It was secretly chosen by these families, like the Rothschilds and stuff, who own the money printing presses. And it was a move by them to create a world dictatorship controlled by this group of people who, like I say, actually carry out human sacrifice. It's just so bizarre that you have trouble believing it, but the evidence is just overwhelming now. And these people have been overthrown, and that's why their project to create a world fascist government with a sort of EU-style structure is collapsing.
Right. So are basically all the world leaders compromised to an extent? Then are they all part of this satanic sort of cult?
To a large extent. When up until now, when somebody became a world leader, they would get a visit from somebody who gave them a bank book with a Vatican bank account with like $1 billion, or maybe, if you're a small country, maybe only 100 million or something. And they say, well, welcome to the world's rich club. Here's the money that you can use for whatever you want. Please accept it, and if you don't accept it, we'll kill you. So it's the old, silver or lead. You can have the bullet or you can have the bribe, and that's how they controlled most world leaders. But that is changing.
Right. So are you saying it's the Vatican who's behind it then? If they're the ones financing it?
Well, when I went to Italy to interview the P2 Lodge leadership, they said that they were the descendants of the Caesars, and that they put on black masks and they gave orders to the mafia and to the Catholic Church. And that, it's bizarre stuff, but I actually was there. I actually met these. This is what they're saying. I'm not saying I believe it, but I'm telling you that's what they told me. They told me that they were given they've been ruling the planet for 26,000 years, and that they'd been given a plot to rule history by until the year 2012. And they coordinated with the movements of the planets. And they, the plot ended in 2012. They didn't know what was going to happen next. That's what, they told me. And you can certainly confirm, at least for several thousands of years, that this group that worships Baal or Set or Satan or Molech has been in power, and they do use murder and bribery and propaganda to take over governments. But I don't think they were completely successful in many parts of the world, I think China and England, for example, I believe were able to, at a deep level, keep themselves out of this control. And now, like I say, in Italy, when they forced the Pope to quit, that meant that there'd been a change at the very top of the P2, and that's why Pope Francis appeared. Remember, popes don't quit. I mean, that's the first time in 600 years something like that happened, you know. So there's been a change there. You got to also remember a lot of kings and queens resigned in Belgium, in Holland. You know, King Beatrix, who founded the Bilderberg, resigned or abdicated. The King of Spain abdicated. The King of Belgium abdicated. These were all people who were involved in this plot. They were being removed at the high level.
Yeah, most of the royalty in Europe, they're all like related. They're all like cousins or second cousins, or they're all related to each other, really, aren't they?
Yes. But like any big family, it doesn't mean they're all one big happy family, and there are different factions. And the people who supported the mass genocide, this plot to kill 90% of humanity in order to supposedly save the environment, have all been removed. So it started at the top and slowly working its way down. And now that's why you have, and the Trump just fired 46 attorneys, and the most important being the one in New York. And this is open way to finally arresting some of these politicians who are involved in the child trafficking in the U.S., who are part of this cult. And that includes, of course, Hillary Clinton and John McCain and Schumer. All these people are being taken down. That's why that Vault 7 release of the CIA stuff was important, because according to American law, the CIA is supposed to work overseas, not inside the United States.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of the CIA wiretapping on Americans is illegal, and so that the group behind that and their leadership are being removed. So it's a cleanup inside the CIA. That's what that release meant.
Okay. This might sound like a weird question, but some people believe that a lot of these groups and such, they're not actually run by humans, that they're actually some kind of either an alien race, or you talk about reptilians and stuff like that. But what is your opinion about that? That a lot of these people, especially in the Vatican, they're not human.
When I went to Italy, they told me that they took orders from the so-called Black Sun, which was an entity they say that exists in the gamma rays, and it influences their minds. And I think that's possible. I mean, certainly they believed it. But what I think happens is that there's certain thought forms that are able to take over human minds.
Yeah.
Sort of like demonic possession. It seems to be at that level where the forensic evidence points to something actually being there. But I've met a lot of these so-called reptilians in person, and they certainly just look like normal people. But I have seen people undergo personality changes where suddenly it's not them anymore, like Leo Zagami, who claimed to be groomed as head of the P2. There were a couple times I met him when it wasn't him. His voice was different, the personality was different. It's like he was being taken over and used like a transmission.
That's like some kind of mind control, isn't it? I mean, you hear about like mind control programs like MK Ultra and that type of thing.
He seemed to be under remote control, and it wasn't him speaking. Just a couple of times. Most of the time it was just him, but you could tell the difference. It was really different.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like a lot of world leaders, if they don't play ball, they're either, programmed or replaced by doubles. Or what do you think about that?
I mean, people who knew Tony Blair said that he became a totally different person after he became prime minister, and part of it you can explain by the fact that they're now representing power, the power structure. It's not them alone. They represent a consensus of the, military spy bureaucracy, and they can't just, say whatever they want. They have to conform. You can look at it that way, but in some cases, it does seem that they're no longer who they were once they're in office. I mean, that's I've seen that myself with Japanese prime minister. I've met most of the ones since the middle of 1980s, and yes, they seem to change when they get in office.
Right. Yeah, that sort of makes sense. Once they're in office, the real control, the real power, the entity takes over, and it can do what needs to be done, whereas the person who actually got voted into power probably didn't want to be
in Japan. What happened was when the prime ministers tried to act on their own, they all died in office rather suddenly, usually of a stroke or heart attack, and they use ricin poison to induce strokes, and I think castor bean oil to cause the heart attacks, but they also have an electrical device that does it. But yeah, and I've actually had reports from a member of the Japanese royal family and from the Japanese military intelligence that Prime Minister Noboru Takeshita of Japan was taken to Alaska and tortured to death, put naked and chased by helicopters, and had his, I'm sorry, this thing, but had his testicles stomped on. And this was filmed, and this film was shown to senior Japanese politicians to say, this is what happened to you if you don't obey us.
Right.
So this is the sort of thing that's been going on at the highest levels of power. These are the people we're now overthrowing.
I wanted to ask you about it's been talked about for a few years now about an imminent financial collapse, like a global reset. Is that imminent, or what do you know about that?
The problem is that, yes, I mean, something's going to happen, and there are negotiations. People in the Trump administration are talking about it. The United States needs to stop using the U.S. dollar. That's the bottom line. They're bankrupt, and the reason they're bankrupt is because they have an overvalued currency. And the problem is that the U.S. dollar is an international currency. It's not an American currency. So the United States needs to issue their own independent currency and have it be much less in value than the international U.S. dollar, so that they can export again and be economically competitive. Because otherwise, their economy can be continually hollowed out, and that's what they're trying to negotiate. And this involves the Chinese, of course, who are probably going to take over the international currency system. But I don't think a final consensus has been reached there yet. But we're getting close. I mean, the few key players are like Xi Jinping of China, and then the Trump administration, and and it's an ongoing process, but I don't think a final solution has been reached. That's what the battle is over now. That's the final thing. Once the control of the money printing presses changes hands, then everything changes, and that's where the final battle is now coming up. Possibly this month. And certainly, as everyone can see, is March 15th when the U.S. government reaches its debt limit. And theoretically they can't spend anymore. It's not going to be that sudden, though, because they have $200 billion in cash, so they can keep going until June, I think. But, there's serious horse trading going on about this very thing right now. But I have not yet heard that a final consensus has been reached yet.
Right. You sort of see like the US debt clock is like keeps going up and up and up, and like it's like 18 trillion, 19 trillion. It's like, how high can it go before something happens, And people have been talking about it for years. It's going to be a financial collapse. I think the last one was 2008. So in a way, we're sort of like well overdue for another collapse, aren't we, really?
I put out documents on the internet showing that the collapse in 2008 was engineered, and a person by the name of Wilfredo Solren and a member of the Indonesian royal family, they took the rights to 700 tons of gold and used that to forge 750,000 tons worth of gold-backed bonds, fake ones, and they used that to create $23 trillion at the Federal Reserve Board in 2008. So what they did was they engineered the collapse so they could take this $23 trillion of fake money and use it to buy assets around the world at bargain basement prices. And they were trying to do that again recently, and that has been stopped. And the people behind that former fraud have been arrested, and they're out of power. So, and I think that's what this whole Freemason meeting is going to be about, but I'm not sure.
Okay. We see a lot about, all these the politicians are all corrupt and everything, and it's very difficult to tell sometimes who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. So who is actually helping, like helping people, they're helping to find a solution to these kind of problems? Is there a group who is actually helping?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that for example, in Italy, what they call the white nobility as opposed to the black nobility was behind the move to, reform the Vatican and put in Francisco. And then in the United States, it's the U.S. military, the generals who think they want to be the good guys and who are patriotic, who realize that they were manipulated into invading Iraq and are very angry about it, are involved. And then people inside the agencies like the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA who are sick of the corruption. I think it's mostly mid-ranking military and intelligence people who want to do the right thing, who kind of started not a bottom-up, but a mid-rank up revolution in these military-industrial complex.
So basically, like the military-industrial complex and the intelligence agencies had enough, basically, of the corruption.
War and the white hats are winning. And in Asia too, I think the Asian secret societies had a big role to play in making this happen, because they can only be used for the greater good. They're not for personal benefit, and I think they played a big role, and we should thank them for helping us.
Talking about the military-industrial complex, are you aware of any technology that's being held back or hidden? Things like free energy or those type of technology that's being hidden from the public, but being used by the military and such.
According to the American Association of Scientists, more than 6,000 patents have been suppressed for so-called national security reasons, and I have heard that anti-gravity is among them, and certainly energy will become much cheaper. I think a lot of things are going to come out now. So yeah, a lot of those UFOs are flown by humans, not by aliens.
Yeah.
And the biggest one of all is I think that our planet is under a quarantine because we have these very evil entities on this planet, and that once they're finally defeated, that the quarantine will end, and it may be possible within our lifetimes that interstellar travel will be allowed. This is the big one. You see the recent announcements by NASA of Earth-like planets, nearby.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also been announcements of NASA of faster-than-light technology. I think that, the quarantine on this planet may be lifted. That's the big one I'm hoping for.
So who has actually placed this quarantine on the planet?
Well, I mean, this gets really esoteric, but I've been told by a lot of people that there's been an incredibly long-lasting interstellar war that is being directed against these negative entities, and that they've been cornered on this planet, and the planet was put under quarantine until they could be finally defeated, and that this has happened now, and it's just a final cleanup of the last entities, and what we can see on the surface of the planet is the removal from power of politicians and kings who are working for these entities. So if that's the case, it means that we were locked on this tiny little planet by a huge galactic community that will soon welcome us as members, if this is true. I mean, I have to see it to believe it, but that's what I'm being told.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that these entities are not allowed to leave now. There was a window of opportunity for them to leave, I think, before 2012. But now, because the planet is quarantined, these entities are here now, and they either have to conform, or I don't know what the consequences would be if they didn't conform or change.
I think it's going to be actual soul death. They're going to be permanently removed from existence. That's what I'm hearing.
Right.
But I think you remember there was a weird Norway spiral a few years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
I
Yeah.
heard that was the biggest and baddest entity escaping to this universe. I mean, that's weird stuff, I know, but that's what I was told. I get told a lot of stuff, and they try to put disinformation through me too, and I don't normally talk about this weirder stuff because it's hard to prove, and it's just extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. But at this point, I think I need to tell people that's what I was told by people involved at the highest levels of government. Whether or not people believe this is up to them, and I myself have to see to fully believe. I'll say, okay, I'm being told this, and it's possible, but I'm not 100%. But I'm hearing a lot of stuff like this now.
Yeah, I think a lot of the esoteric stuff, even when you talk about stuff like wars in astral and things like that, they're very, very difficult to prove. You may experience it yourself, but trying to explain it to someone else is very difficult.
Yeah. So again, what you need to do is point to things in the world we can all share and see that confirm these things. So, for example, what I was telling you earlier, I heard that the Saudi royal family, who'd been under control of these entities for a very long time, had fled Saudi Arabia and were seeking asylum in Indonesia. What you can see in the official news is that they're on an official visit, right?
Yeah.
And then you can confirm in the Indonesian newspapers that they've prolonged the visit by 3 days. So there are ways to confirm these things to a certain extent, and you have to combine, all the different sources of information to try to triangulate on the truth.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stories that you see in mainstream news is mostly disinformation or cover stories. They don't really tell you the truth in like mainstream media.
Yeah, I think, I was in the mainstream media for a long time, and I think what happens a lot of the time is that, there is a lot of what they write is true, but a lot of what is true they don't write. So it's what they don't write that's important, and they do tell outright lies, but I would say 80% of what they write is true, 20% is lies, but they don't write about a lot of the true things that happen. They suppress the news. I think it's the best way of describing it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, I think. You mentioned like the vortex in Norway. I wanted to ask you about, do you know what's happening with CERN? There's been a lot of different stories about they're opening black holes and they're bringing in entities and all kinds of things. What do you know about what's happening at CERN?
I think that they accidentally opened something and that it's being shut, and that they're now being presented with like an increasingly complex sort of structure so that they can keep studying away and forever and never quite get to the answer. That's what I've been told. So something is preventing them from getting too deep into the fundamental structure of the universe. That's what I've heard. But they at a certain point they did open something they shouldn't have. That's what I was told.
Right. Yeah. I've heard it was some kind of gateway, to another, whatever you want to call it, dimension, reality, or whatever you want to call it. And they pulled in, they say that CERN is designed to find the God particle, but to spend billions and billions of pounds to find something which they're not even sure even exists doesn't make any sense, really. So there must be another agenda behind CERN.
Yeah, I think it is, an attempt to break the quarantine on this planet. And I believe that in the future, when we do travel to other planets, a lot of it's going to be other dimensions, not, it won't be, it'll be like changing channels on your TV set rather than getting on a rocket and going somewhere. That's what I believe is going to happen for most of it.
Yeah, the whole NASA thing is ridiculous to think that we're using technology from the 40s, rockets to get into space, when they obviously have technology that's far more advanced than that, which they're not showing us.
I once met a member of the Pentagon's sort of psychic warfare squad, and he told me NASA stood for not a space agency.
That's a good one.
Yeah, but if you look at their own press conferences, I remember one that stuck in my mind was that they had a press conference a couple years ago where they announced that they thought they had a way to break through the ionosphere, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait a minute, didn't you break through the ionosphere when you went to the moon in 1960?
Yeah, I saw that. They went over it again, didn't they? And said that they just discovered it, and that was years, decades after they were supposed to have originally done it in the first place. I was going to ask you, Ben, do you have any information on, there's been reports of nuclear explosions happening in Antarctica. I just wondered if you had any information on that at all.
Well, there's a lot of disinformation about Antarctica too, but what I can confirm from multiple sources is that for one thing, it's not under the control of any national government. It's a sort of a
Okay.
and so that international corporations have been doing forbidden research there, and they've evacuated all the civilians from there recently. There's something going on, but there's and then the Patriarch Kirill of Russia went there after. Remember, there was a weird explosion and lightning in Mecca.
Yeah.
And then after that, a Russian fleet showed up, and they went to Mecca or the port nearby Mecca, Jeddah, and then they put something on board there, and then they took it to Antarctica.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
And supposedly this is something called the Ark of Gabriel, or they uncovered some incredibly powerful object.
Some ancient device that had been buried there, which they discovered while they were doing construction work at Mecca.
And there was a document held by the Russian Orthodox Church that described what to do with it, and that's why there was the Patriarch Kirill accompanied this thing to Antarctica. But who knows? I mean, something strange is going on there. The other thing is that if you look on Google Earth, it's all blacked out, Antarctica. It's not, you can't see it. They're censoring something.
Antarctica is a bit of a mystery because they did talk about the Nazis went down to like South America and they had a base in Antarctica and they were developing like UFOs there, and the whole Admiral Byrd story, when they went down there and they were attacked and they came back early. So I don't know if you know anything about that, about possible Nazis being down there or anything like that.
Well, I was in Chile and Argentina. I actually saw a Nazi base with my own eyes in Chile, Comunidad Dignidad. But the one I saw was involved in disappearing lots of people during the Dirty War. But yeah, the reports are, and the best sources for these are Russian documentaries that seem to have very comprehensive evidence to back up what they're saying. But the Nazis apparently discovered some hollows under the ice created by hot springs, and with tunnels that they could access underwater through submarines, and they evacuated their top scientists, and then 2,400 young women between 16 and 24 to continue their top secret weapons research after World War II ended. And I've heard they since moved to the Andes, most of these facilities, and they're still there.
Yeah, after World War II, there were a lot of missing U-boats that nobody accounted for, and they believe a lot of them went to Antarctica, to a base in Antarctica.
That's right. They used them after World War II to smuggle drugs around the world. Cocaine from South America, amphetamines from North Korea, and heroin from the Golden Triangle to finance this sort of Nazi Fourth Reich attempt to take over, to establish their Reich. And that's what was, the 911 was the Nazi attempt to take over the United States, which is now being dismantled. That's what I've heard,
Do you know anything about any technology that was discovered in the Middle East, in Iraq and Jordan and such places during the Gulf War? There's stories about a Stargate there, and other technology that was hoarded by the Americans.
The only thing I know that about that's not out there, or that it's out there, is that, they destroyed the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, right?
Mm-hmm.
They destroyed it. This is a place where they'd sacrificed countless human beings and animals for a very long time. And when that was destroyed, apparently a gate was shut that closed, sealed an escape route and an entrance to these negative entities. That's the only thing I know about that.
Right.
But I have, about Stargates and strange stuff in the Middle East, but I just can't confirm it.
Yeah, it's very difficult to confirm. I mean, I know I'm not seeing pictures of like truckfuls of gold being hoarded out of Iraq and Jordan.
Oh yeah, that's for sure going on. I have talked to the members of the family of the Shah of Iran, and part of what's been going on does have to do with gold. Before the Shah of Iran lost power, um, gold was taken to Thailand. So the old Persian gold stash, was removed from the Middle East to prevent it from falling into the hands of these Kabbalists. And they're running out of gold, which is why, and at the very highest level of world finance, people don't accept paper. They need gold, and they have the gold, and they've been chasing after gold. That's what's been behind a lot of the events of the past many years.
So who controls most of the gold on the planet right now? Then is it the Chinese?
It's the old Asian royal families. I think control about 85% of it, and they're preventing access to that gold. Cutting off the gold by the negative factions, and they've been caught trying to use tungsten, gold-coated tungsten, and they won't audit the Fort Knox because there's no gold there. They've been lying about that.
Yeah, even the Federal Reserve Bank, was it in New York? I think Germany asked for their gold, and they said, "Oh, you can't have it for like 4 or 5 years."
That's right. So, and they're still desperately seeking gold, and they're still not getting it.
So the problem is, does the US have any gold then?
No. And that's why they have silver, though. And I think that, a deal is going to be reached where the United States corporate government that was set up in, 1871, or it was going to be dismantled. The republic will be restored, and then the debts will be written off, and they'll have a new asset-backed currency. And I think at that point, the Americans will be offered gold to help rebuild their country.
Right. So basically, the Asian or the Chinese would offer gold to the US.
Yeah, but only after they finish cleaning up, these Satanists.
Yeah.
And that's going on as we speak.
We're gonna finish up in about 5 minutes, but I wanted to ask you about Julian Assange and about the whole WikiLeaks thing. What is your opinion about Julian Assange? Is he a good guy, a bad guy? What is your opinion?
Julian Assange was out there trying to deny that 911 was anything other than 19 Arabs with box cutters. Okay, he was working for Mossad, and nothing that he leaked was ever compromising against Israel or anything about 911. So he was a Mossad front, and what I heard was that he was being killed and replaced, and that now the so-called WikiLeaks operation is held by a faction in the CIA. And they might use Assange computer graphics or something, but the man himself is no longer there. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen an interview he did where somebody actually showed that it wasn't him; it was some kind of CGI, because there were a few glitches in the actual video where you could tell like his collar glitched and a few other things glitched in the video, which showed that it wasn't really him in the interview.
That's right. Same with George Soros. He's no longer with us. I think a lot of them, they've tried to pretend that they're still there, but they're not. They've gone. They can only fake it so long. And I think that there's going to be a big changes in the Far East now, in Korea and Japan too, soon. As you know, there's an enormous struggle over Korea because they're going to unify Korea, and they're going to have an emperor, and the fight is over who's going to be the emperor. Is it going to be Kim Jong-un, or is it going to be his I'm not sure what it is. Kim Jong-nam's son, Kim Han-sol. Yeah. So there's a dynastic battle there, but I've heard that the Korean thing will be solved. The peninsula will be unified. There'll be a change of government in Japan. there's a lot of stuff happening. But so what happened in Europe is happening in Europe. What happened in the U.S. and England is happening in Japan and Korea now, and that would be the final cleanup of the West. And after that, it's very possible that some sort of, not a world government may be announced, not a new world order, more like a kind of a free world federation to make sure that there's world peace, and to make sure that transnational criminals like the Bushes can no longer, carry out and provoke wars. Something like that is going to be announced possibly this year. That's what I'm hearing. But
so
it
who
won't
would be who would be in charge of this new world sort of government? It would be like NATO, or who would be in charge of it?
I think it would be a 50-50 East-West split, and it would be a consensus of the sort of government structures on both sides, and that probably they would start with a Westerner as head of everything, and then they would switch to an Asian as the head of everything, and then they would let whoever the best person was on the planet, regardless of their cultural, ethnic origin, be, at the top. But it'll never be a single dictator. It'll be, like a group of 7 people, and it'll be a transparently run meritocracy, where everybody can see who's at the top, how they got there, and why they're there, and if they don't like it, they can climb up to the top themselves and try to take them down. I think that's what's being negotiated.
Right. So would that put an end to like world leaders and governments? It would all come under one sort of umbrella. There'd be one sort of government.
Most of the existing structures would remain, but there's something above that to plan for the future of the planet as a whole, and to deal with problems that we all share, like we all share the oceans, and they're being depleted of fish at an unsustainable rate, so something needs to be done about that. The destruction of the rainforest, that needs to be stopped. Things like that are not, that a single nation state cannot handle. But the structures would be more or less intact, minus the corrupt elements,
Right. So most of the world governments would stay as they are. They would just have a higher, another level above them that would overlook what they're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, overlook things that affect the planet as a whole. So it'd be a giant infrastructure thing. So, for example, a tunnel connecting Alaska to Asia, so you could ride a train from New York to London, and a plan to turn the Sahara Desert into a green oasis. Things like that, that would start in earnest. So it'll be a very good thing for the average person. And I think there's going to be some kind of jubilee, like a cancellation of all debt and a redistribution of assets, just a one-off thing to reduce the incredible wealth imbalances that have, threatening the stability of the entire, civilization, especially in the West. And especially all the money that was taken through fraudulent fiat money creation is going to be taken and given back to the people. Right. So, for example, at $23 trillion it created through fraud in 2008, well, that's not there.
Okay, well, that's the end of the show today. Sorry it was only 1 hour, but hopefully we can have Benjamin back on. Thank you for coming on, Benjamin.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.